The telegram had arrived 3 days before Helena Zimmerman's train pulled into Enid, Oklahoma territory, but the man who was supposed to meet her never came. She stood on the weathered platform with her two battered trunks, watching the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty street, her carefully pressed traveling dress already wilting in the oppressive heat of August 1893. Other passengers dispersed quickly, claimed by waiting families or striding purposefully toward the cluster of buildings that made up the town's modest commercial district. Within 20 minutes, Helena found herself utterly alone except for the station master, who kept glancing at her with poorly concealed pity as he swept the same section of platform for the third time. "Miss, I need to close up soon," he finally said, his weathered face apologetic beneath his green visor. "Are you certain someone's coming for you?" Helena swallowed hard, fighting the urge to cry. She had sold nearly everything she owned back in Philadelphia to pay for this journey west, answering an advertisement from a Mr. Samuel Porter, who sought a refined woman of good character to become his wife. Their correspondence had been brief but seemingly sincere, and when he sent money for her passage along with detailed instructions to meet him at the Enid station, she had believed her prayers were answered. Her aunt's home, where she had lived since her parents died of influenza 2 years prior, had become unbearable. Her uncle's wandering hands and her aunt's willful blindness to his behavior had made staying impossible. Marriage to a stranger in Oklahoma territory seemed preferable to that particular hell. "I was supposed to meet Mr. Samuel Porter," she said, hearing the tremor in her own voice. "He owns a mercantile here in town. Perhaps if you could direct me there." The station master's expression shifted from pity to something worse, something that made her stomach clench with dread. "Porter's mercantile." He removed his cap and scratched his head. "Miss, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Samuel Porter died near about 3 weeks ago. Snake bite got infected. Real tragedy." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Helena gripped the handle of the nearest trunk to steady herself. "Dead, but he sent me a telegram just last week. He sent money." "That's peculiar," the station master said, frowning. "Unless someone's playing a cruel joke, which I wouldn't put past some folk, or maybe the telegram got delayed somehow. These things happen." He looked genuinely distressed on her behalf. "Do you have people you can wire? Money to get back home?" Helena shook her head slowly. She had exactly $4.32 to her name, barely enough to eat for a week, certainly not enough for train fare back east. And even if she could afford the ticket, she had no home to return to. She had written to her aunt explaining her departure and her reasons in terms that left no room for misunderstanding. There would be no welcome waiting for her in Philadelphia. "There's a boarding house down on 3rd Street, the station master offered. "Mrs. Callahan runs it. She's decent enough, though prices aren't cheap. Might give you a night or two while you figure things out." Before Helena could respond, the sound of a wagon approaching made them both turn. A man was driving a weathered buckboard pulled by 2 sturdy draft horses, and as he drew closer, Helena observed him with the careful attention of someone whose future might depend on reading character quickly. He appeared to be in his early 30s, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His hat was pushed back enough to reveal dark hair and serious eyes that held a certain wariness, like an animal that had been hurt and learned caution. His clothes were clean but worn, and everything about him suggested a man who worked hard and lived simply. He pulled the wagon to a stop near the platform and climbed down with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own body. When he looked at Helena, something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly to identify. "Miss Zimmerman," he asked, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. Helena's heart leaped with desperate hope. "Yes, I'm Helena Zimmerman. Are you acquainted with Mr. Porter?" The man removed his hat, holding it loosely in work-roughened hands. "I'm Dalton Price. I have a cattle ranch about 8 miles north of town. And no, I didn't know Sam Porter well, just in passing." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I was in town picking up supplies when I heard Joe here mention to someone that there was a woman stranded at the station. Came to see if I could help." The station master, Joe, nodded enthusiastically. "That's right neighborly of you, Dalton. Miss Zimmerman here was supposed to meet Sam Porter, but of course that can't happen now, poor fellow being dead and all." Dalton's expression remained neutral, but Helena thought she detected a flash of sympathy in his eyes. "I heard about that terrible thing." He looked directly at Helena. "Do you have somewhere to go?" The directness of the question, delivered without judgment or prurient curiosity, nearly undid her composure. She straightened her spine and met his gaze. "I will manage. Thank you for your concern. That's not what I asked." His tone wasn't harsh, just matter of fact. "It's going to be dark in a few hours. Do you have a place to sleep tonight and money to pay for it?" The honest answer was no, but admitting that to a strange man felt dangerous in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Helena had been raised to be proper, to guard her reputation carefully, to never place herself in compromising situations. Yet here she was, stranded in a territory she had never seen before, with almost no money and no prospects. Propriety seemed like a luxury she could no longer afford. "I've been waiting for you," Dalton said suddenly, and the words hung in the air between them, strange and weighted with meaning she didn't understand. Helena blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "That came out wrong. What I mean is, I've been waiting for someone like you. I've been thinking for a while now that I need help on the ranch. My wife died 4 years ago in childbirth, along with our baby. Since then, it's been just me trying to keep the place running. I'm not doing so well with the parts that need a woman's touch. The house is falling apart. I can barely cook anything that doesn't come out of a can, and I'm drowning in mending that needs doing." He took a breath and continued, "I know this is sudden, and you don't know me from Adam. But I'm proposing a business arrangement. You need a place to stay and a way to support yourself. I need help managing a household. I can offer you room and board, plus a fair wage. There's a separate bedroom you can use. I'm not suggesting anything improper." Helena stared at him, trying to process this unexpected proposition. Everything about the situation screamed scandal. An unmarried woman living alone with an unmarried man, even with separate bedrooms, would be considered deeply improper back in Philadelphia. But this wasn't Philadelphia, and she was quickly learning that survival sometimes required bending rules she had always taken for granted. "What would people think?" she heard herself ask. "They'd think you were my housekeeper," Dalton said simply, "which you would be. I know it's not what you came out here for, and I know it's not ideal. But it's honest work and you'd have a roof over your head while you figure out your next step. If you decide after a few weeks that it's not working out, I'll bring you back to town and pay you for your time. Fair?" Joe the station master was watching this exchange with undisguised fascination. "Dalton's a good man, Miss Zimmerman. Known him since he came out here 7 years ago. He's honest and works hard. His place is modest but respectable." Helena looked between the two men, her mind racing. Every instinct she had been taught told her this was dangerous, that accepting would be reckless. But what choice did she have? She could spend her last few dollars on a room at the boarding house, and then what? Find work as a laundress or in a saloon. Those prospects seemed far more dangerous than going to work for a man who at least had a witness to his character, and was making his offer publicly. "I want to be very clear," she said, lifting her chin and looking Dalton directly in the eye. "I am not offering anything beyond housekeeping services. If you're expecting anything else, you need to say so now." "I'm not," he said firmly. "I give you my word. You'll have your own space and your privacy. I'm looking for help, not a mistress." The word made her blush, but she appreciated his bluntness. At least she knew where she stood. "Then I accept, Mr. Price, though I reserve the right to leave if the arrangement becomes untenable." "That's fair," he agreed. He gestured to her trunks. "Let me load these up and we can head out." It's about an hour's ride to the ranch. As Dalton lifted her trunks into the wagon with ease, Helena felt the full weight of what she was doing settle over her. She was leaving town with a man she had known for all of 15 minutes, trusting that his offer was genuine and that she would be safe. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She accepted his hand to climb up onto the wagon seat, noticing that his grip was strong but careful, that he released her the moment she was settled. The ride north out of Enid took them through increasingly empty landscape. The town gave way to scattered homesteads, which eventually gave way to rolling grassland dotted with cattle. The sun was lowering toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Despite her anxiety about the situation, Helena found herself captivated by the sheer expanse of it all. In Philadelphia, buildings pressed close together, blocking out the sky. Here, the land seemed to stretch forever in all directions, vast and wild and beautiful. Dalton drove in silence for the first 20 minutes, seeming content to let the horses set their own pace. Finally, he spoke. "I should tell you more about the place so you know what you're getting into. The house has 4 rooms, a main living area with the kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a small room I use for storage. There's a barn, a chicken coop, and a smokehouse. I run about 200 head of cattle, though that number fluctuates. I have 2 ranch hands who come most days, brothers named Tom and Eddie Grant. They're rough around the edges but good men. They usually eat lunch at the house, which is part of why I need help. I can't keep up with the work and cook for 3 men." "How long have you been managing alone?" Helena asked. 4 years, like I said. First year after Mary died, I had Tom's wife helping out, but then they moved their family closer to her people in Kansas. Since then, I've been muddling through. Place shows it too. Curtains are torn, furniture needs repair, gardens gone to seed. I keep meaning to fix things, but there's always something more urgent with the cattle or the buildings." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a statement of facts. Helena found that refreshing after her uncle's constant complaints about every minor inconvenience in his comfortable life. "Tell me about your wife," she said, then immediately worried she had overstepped. "I'm sorry, that was too personal." "It's all right," Dalton said. "If you're going to live in the house, you should know. Mary was from Missouri. We met when I was working on a ranch there, fell in love quick. She was excited about coming out here and building something of our own, but the pregnancy was hard on her. The doctor said the baby was positioned wrong. When her time came, there were complications. Neither of them made it through the night." His jaw tightened. "I buried them on a hill overlooking the ranch. It's peaceful there." "I'm so sorry," Helena said softly. The grief in his voice was still fresh despite 4 years having passed. "What about you?" Dalton asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. "What brought you all the way from Philadelphia to answer a mail-order bride advertisement?" Helena hesitated, then decided he deserved honesty. "My parents died 2 years ago. I went to live with my aunt and uncle. My uncle proved to be less than honorable in his behavior toward me, and my aunt preferred to pretend nothing was wrong rather than confront him. When I saw Mr. Porter's advertisement, it seemed like an escape. I had some small inheritance from my mother that paid for the journey. I thought I was choosing a new life, but it appears life had other plans. Dalton was quiet for a moment. Your uncle hurt you. Not in the way you're probably thinking, Helena said carefully. But he made it clear what he wanted, and it was only a matter of time before my refusals weren't enough. I had to leave. Good, Dalton said firmly. Good that you left, I mean. Man like that doesn't deserve the title of uncle or any respect that comes with it. He glanced at her. For what it's worth, you're safe at my ranch. I meant what I said about this being a business arrangement. Something in his tone made her believe him. They rode in more comfortable silence as the sun continued its descent. Eventually, Dalton pointed ahead. There, that's the ranch. Helena looked where he indicated and saw buildings emerging from the grassland. The house was modest, a simple structure of wood that had weathered to gray. A barn stood nearby, larger than the house, and she could see the smaller outbuildings he had mentioned. It wasn't impressive, but it looked solid and real in a way that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. This would be her home, at least for now. As they drew closer, she noticed the signs of neglect Dalton had mentioned. The porch sagged slightly, the windows were grimy, and what might once have been a garden was now mostly weeds. But she also noticed the careful repairs to the barn, the sturdy fencing, the healthy-looking cattle grazing in the distance. Dalton had clearly been putting all his energy into the working parts of the ranch, while letting the domestic side deteriorate. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down, then came around to help her. His hand spanned her waist as he lifted her down, and she was struck by the strange intimacy of the gesture, even though it was perfectly proper. When was the last time anyone had touched her with simple kindness, without demand or expectation? "I'll show you inside," he said, already reaching for one of her trunks. The interior of the house was dim and dusty, but solidly built. The main room served as both living area and kitchen, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and a cast iron stove in the corner. A scarred wooden table with 4 mismatched chairs sat near the kitchen area. The furniture was simple but functional, including a worn sofa and 2 rocking chairs near the fireplace. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, and cobwebs draped the corners. Dalton looked around as if seeing it through her eyes and shifted uncomfortably. "I know it's not much, haven't had time to keep up with cleaning." "It's fine," Helena said and meant it. "I've seen worse." That was a lie, but a kind one. She had never seen any home in quite this state of neglect, but she also recognized the bones of something good. With work, this could be comfortable. He showed her to one of the bedrooms, a small space with a simple bed frame, a dresser, and a washstand. The mattress looked relatively new, which surprised her. "I bought that mattress 2 years ago," Dalton explained, following her gaze. "Kept thinking I should have someone to help, kept not doing anything about it. Guess I was finally motivated." He set her trunk down and stepped back into the doorway, maintaining careful distance. "I'll let you settle in. There's water in the pump outside. I usually eat about sundown, which gives us maybe an hour. I've got some beans and salt pork we can heat up. Nothing fancy." "Thank you," Helena said. "I'll be out in a few minutes to help." After he left, closing the door behind him, Helena sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the full impact of the day. This morning she had been on a train, full of nervous hope about meeting her intended husband. Now she was in a house belonging to a stranger, preparing to start a life she had never imagined. She allowed herself exactly 2 minutes of quiet tears, then stood and splashed water from the basin on her face. There was no point in dwelling on what might have been. She needed to focus on surviving what was. She changed out of her traveling dress into something more practical, a simple cotton work dress in dark blue that had seen better days. After unpinning her hair and rebraiding it into a more secure style, she looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. Her reflection showed a woman with brown hair, gray eyes, and an unremarkable face that her aunt had always said was too serious. Well, serious would serve her better than pretty out here. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Dalton had started a fire in the stove and was examining a pot with a dubious expression. "I wasn't lying about my cooking," he said. "I can manage not to burn beans, but that's about the extent of it." "Let me," Helena said, moving into what would now be her domain. She found the beans already soaking in water, which was a good start. The salt pork needed cutting and the beans needed proper seasoning, but she could work with this. As she moved around the kitchen, familiarizing herself with where things were kept, she felt some of her anxiety ease. This, at least, was familiar territory. She had been managing her aunt's kitchen for 2 years. She knew how to cook and clean and organize a household. Dalton watched her for a moment, then said, "I need to check on the horses and make sure everything's secure for the night. I'll be back in about 20 minutes. After he left, Helena took stock of the kitchen more thoroughly. The pantry was surprisingly well stocked with basics: flour, cornmeal, sugar, coffee, canned goods, dried beans, and rice. There was a smokehouse outside with preserved meat. She could work with this. She could make this into proper meals instead of the bachelor fare Dalton had been surviving on. She had the beans simmering with the salt pork and had mixed up a quick batch of cornbread when Dalton returned. He stopped in the doorway and just looked at the scene. The stove radiating warmth, the smell of food cooking, a woman moving purposefully in his kitchen. Something in his expression made Helena's heart clench. He looked like a man seeing something he had thought lost forever. "Smells good," he said quietly. They ate at the wooden table as darkness fell outside. Helena had found candles and lit 3 of them, casting warm light over the simple meal. The beans were well seasoned and the cornbread was hot and golden. It wasn't fancy, but it was substantial and properly cooked. Dalton ate with the focused attention of a man who had been living on inadequate food for too long. "This is the best meal I've had in years," he said after his second helping. "I mean that." "It's just beans and cornbread," Helena replied, but she was pleased nonetheless. "It's more than that," Dalton said. "It's made with care. There's a difference." He paused. "I should tell you about the routine here. I'm usually up before dawn to start chores. Tom and Eddie arrive around 7. We work until noon, come in for lunch, then work until evening. Supper's usually around 7 or 8, depending on what needs doing. I know that's a lot of cooking. I can manage," Helena assured him. "What about laundry, mending, cleaning?" "However you want to organize it," he said. "I'm not going to dictate how you spend your time as long as the necessary work gets done. The bedroom you're in is yours. I won't enter it without permission. The storage room is mostly tools and ranch equipment, but there might be some of Mary's things in there still. If you want to go through them, see if there's anything useful, you're welcome to." The mention of his dead wife's belongings felt strange, but Helena nodded. "I'll be respectful." "I know you will," Dalton said. He stood and carried his plate to the washbasin. "I'll help clean up." "You don't have to," Helena protested. "This is your first night," he said. "I can help. Tomorrow you'll have settled in more." They washed the dishes in companionable silence, and Helena found the domesticity of it oddly comforting. When everything was clean and put away, Dalton banked the fire in the stove and lit a lantern. "I'll be up early," he said. "But you don't need to be. Take tomorrow morning to rest and get your bearings. Afternoon will be soon enough to start settling in properly." Helena wanted to argue that she should start earning her keep immediately, but exhaustion was catching up with her. The long journey, the emotional upheaval, and the uncertainty of her situation were all taking their toll. "Thank you," she said. "Good night, Mr. Price." "Dalton," he corrected gently. "We're going to be living under the same roof. Might as well use first names. Good night, Helena." In her small bedroom, Helena unpacked her nightgown and prepared for bed. The mattress was indeed new and surprisingly comfortable. As she lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, she thought about the strange turn her life had taken. She had expected to be married by now, beginning a new life with Mr. Porter. Instead, she was alone in a small room, employed by a widowed rancher who seemed kind but remained essentially a stranger. The thought should have terrified her, and part of it did. But another part, a part she hadn't known existed, felt something else entirely. She felt possibility. For the first time in years, she wasn't trapped. She had work, a place to sleep, and the freedom to leave if she chose. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was hers to shape. That realization carried her into sleep. Helena woke to sounds she couldn't immediately identify. Animals, distant voices, the creak of the house settling. Gray pre-dawn light filtered through the window. She remembered Dalton saying she could rest this morning, but old habits were hard to break. In her aunt's house, sleeping past dawn had earned sharp words and sharper looks. She dressed quickly and ventured into the main room. The fire in the stove had been rekindled, and a pot of coffee sat warming. Dalton was nowhere to be seen, but evidence of his morning routine was everywhere. Muddy boots by the door, a jacket hung on a peg, a plate and cup drying beside the wash basin. Helena poured herself coffee and stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the grassland. The sky turned from gray to pink to brilliant gold, and she understood a little better why people came west. There was something about all this space that made breathing easier. She spent the morning exploring her new domain more thoroughly. The house was solidly built but desperately needed attention. She found cleaning supplies in various states of usefulness and set about making a plan. First, she would tackle the kitchen, making it truly functional. Then the main living area, then the other bedroom which Dalton used. She wouldn't enter without permission, but she could at least clean the door frame and floor just outside it. In the storage room, she found exactly what Dalton had mentioned: tools, equipment, and several crates that clearly contained personal items. She left those alone for now, but made note of them. If there were linens or household items that could be useful, she would ask Dalton's permission to go through them properly. By the time she heard voices approaching the house around noon, Helena had transformed the kitchen. Every surface was scrubbed, the floor was swept and mopped, the windows sparkled, and she had bread rising for lunch. She had found ham in the smokehouse and potatoes in the root cellar, and was preparing a proper meal when the door opened. Dalton entered first, followed by two men who had to be the Grant brothers. They stopped short at the sight of the clean kitchen and the woman standing at the stove. "Gentlemen," Dalton said, "this is Helena Zimmerman. She's going to be managing the household from now on. Helena, these are Tom and Eddie Grant." The older brother, Tom, was perhaps 40 with a weathered face and salt and pepper hair. Eddie looked to be in his mid-30s, stockier than his brother with a ready smile. Both removed their hats respectfully. "Madam," Tom said, "pleased to meet you." "Very pleased," Eddie added, his eyes taking in the transformed kitchen. "Lord above, it actually looks clean in here." "Sit down," Helena said, gesturing to the table. "Lunch will be ready in a few minutes." She served them fried ham, boiled potatoes, bread, and coffee. The men ate with the same focused attention Dalton had shown the night before, and Helena realized they had all been living on inadequate food for far too long. When Eddie reached for his third piece of bread, Tom elbowed him, but Helena just smiled. "There's plenty," she assured them. "Eat as much as you like." After the meal, the men returned to work and Helena tackled the lunch dishes. She had just finished when Dalton came back inside, alone this time. "Wanted to check if you need anything from town," he said. "I'm going tomorrow for supplies." "Make a list of whatever you want for the kitchen." "I will," Helena said. "Dalton, about your wife's things in the storage room, would it be all right if I went through them? I'm not trying to replace her, but if there are linens or kitchen items that could be useful." He was quiet for a long moment. "That's fine. She'd want her things used, not left to gather dust. Just if there are personal items like letters or jewelry, set those aside for me, of course." He nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. "The kitchen looks good, really good, thank you." After he left, Helena went to the storage room. The crates containing personal items were clearly marked, and she opened them carefully, respectfully. She found linens in good condition, carefully embroidered dish towels, a set of china that was too fine for everyday use but could be saved for special occasions, and various household items that had clearly belonged to a woman who took pride in her home. At the bottom of one crate, wrapped in cloth, she found a quilt in a wedding ring pattern. It was beautifully made, each stitch perfect, and Helena felt tears prick her eyes as she imagined Mary making this, dreaming of her future, not knowing how short that future would be. She set the quilt aside carefully and continued her inventory. By the time she was done, she had linens for the beds, fresh curtains to replace the torn ones, and various items that would make the house more comfortable. She spent the afternoon washing the linens and hanging them to dry in the sun, then began the process of mending the curtains that could be saved and taking measurements for new ones where needed. The afternoon passed in productive work, the kind that left her tired but satisfied. She had forgotten what it felt like to work toward building something rather than just surviving day to day in someone else's house. Here, her efforts made a visible difference. Every clean surface, every mended item was an improvement she could see and take pride in. She made stew for supper, using beef from the smokehouse and vegetables from what remained in the root cellar. When Dalton came in at dusk, he stopped and stared at the main room. She had hung the mended curtains, cleaned until everything gleamed, and even polished the worn furniture. With the table set and food cooking, the house looked like a home. "You didn't have to do all this today," he said, but there was something in his voice that might have been gratitude or relief or maybe a little bit of grief. "I wanted to," Helena replied simply. "This is my job now." Over supper, they talked about the ranch. Dalton explained that he was preparing for fall roundup, when he would gather the cattle and take some to market. It was his big income for the year, and everything depended on it going well. He talked about the land, about the challenges of ranching, about his hopes for the future. Helena found herself genuinely interested, asking questions about things she had never considered before. How did you know which cattle to sell? What happened if there was a drought? How did you protect the herd from predators? Dalton answered patiently, seeming pleased by her interest. Most women don't care about the details of ranching, he observed. I'm living on a ranch now, Helena said. I should understand how it works. Something shifted in his expression, something warm and approving. That's a good attitude. As the days turned into weeks, they settled into a rhythm. Helena rose early to make breakfast, packed lunches for the men, cleaned and mended and cooked. She started a garden, planting fall vegetables that might still have time to grow before frost. She organized the household with the kind of efficiency her aunt had trained into her, but without the constant criticism and impossible standards. Dalton was an easy man to work for. He was appreciative without being effusive, respected her space and privacy, and proved to be better company than she had expected. In the evenings, after supper was done, they often sat on the porch as the sun set, talking about inconsequential things. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about the brother who had died in an accident when Dalton was 15, about his decision to head north and make his own way. She told him about her parents, about her father's bookshop in Philadelphia, about learning to read at her mother's knee. "Do you miss it?" he asked one evening. "The city, I mean, all those people, all that activity." Helena considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss my parents, but they've been gone long enough that the grief isn't as sharp. The city itself, no." It was loud and crowded, and everything smelled of smoke and horses and too many people pressed together. "Here, it's quiet. I can breathe. I can see the sky. I think I like it better." "It gets lonely," Dalton warned. "Especially in winter when the snow comes and we might go weeks without seeing anyone but each other and Tom and Eddie." "I've been lonely in a crowded house," Helena said quietly. "At least here, when I'm alone, I'm also at peace." He looked at her in the gathering darkness, and she felt the weight of his attention. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more fragile, maybe, more shocked by the work and the isolation, but you just adapted." "I didn't have much choice," Helena pointed out. "You had a choice," Dalton countered. "You could have refused to come here with me. You could have insisted on staying in town even though you had no money, thrown yourself on the charity of strangers. You could have given up, but you didn't. You made a hard decision, and then you made the best of it. That takes strength." The compliment warmed her more than it probably should have. She wasn't used to being seen as strong. Her aunt had always emphasized her weaknesses, her inadequacies, the ways she failed to live up to expectations. Dalton saw her differently, and she liked the person she was in his eyes. As September arrived and the heat began to ease, the ranch became a flurry of activity. Dalton and the Grant brothers spent long days preparing for the roundup, and Helena found herself feeding not just the three of them, but occasionally 4 or 5 other ranchers who came to help, with the understanding that Dalton would help them in return when their time came. She cooked huge quantities of food, packed supplies for the men to take with them when they rode out overnight, and kept everything running smoothly at the house. One afternoon, when Dalton came back to the house briefly for supplies he had forgotten, he found Helena on a ladder, fixing a loose board on the porch roof. "What are you doing?" he called up, alarmed. "Get down from there before you hurt yourself." "It was loose," Helena said, not stopping her work. "I'm almost done. I could have fixed it. You already have too much to do." She hammered in the last nail and climbed down. "It's handled." He looked at the repair, then at her, and shook his head with something that might have been amusement. "You're full of surprises." "My father taught me basic carpentry," Helena explained. "He said a person should be able to fix the things they use. Is the repair adequate?" Dalton tested the board. "It's perfect, thank you." He hesitated, then added, "I don't think I've said this enough, but you've made a real difference here. The house feels like a home again. I didn't realize how much I missed that." Before Helena could respond, he had turned and headed back toward the barn, leaving her alone with the sudden rapid beating of her heart. It wasn't the first time he had thanked her, but something about his tone, about the vulnerability in admitting he missed having a home, touched her deeply. That night, she lay awake thinking about Dalton in ways that probably weren't appropriate for an employer and employee. She thought about the way he moved, efficient and confident, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which was happening more often lately. The careful way he maintained distance from her, always respectful, never presuming. She thought about what it would be like if they weren't employer and employee, if they were something more. The thoughts alarmed her. She had come west to marry a stranger out of desperation, not love. She had accepted this position as a practical solution to a desperate situation. Developing feelings for Dalton wasn't part of the plan, and it complicated everything. What if he didn't feel the same? What if he did, but only because she was the only woman around? What if she was confusing gratitude and relief with something deeper? She resolved to be more careful with her heart. But hearts, Helena was learning, didn't always follow resolutions. As the days continued, she found herself increasingly aware of Dalton. The sound of his voice when he talked to the horses. The way he was endlessly patient with animals but could be blunt with people. His habit of standing on the porch at dawn, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise. The surprising gentleness of his hands when he showed her how to treat a chicken's injured foot. One evening in late September, after a particularly long day of work, Helena carried coffee out to the porch where Dalton sat in one of the rocking chairs. She handed him a cup and sat in the other chair, both of them looking out at the sunset painting the grassland gold. "Roundup's nearly done," Dalton said. "Went better than I hoped. Herd's in good shape. If the market prices hold, it'll be a good year." "That's wonderful," Helena said sincerely. "If it goes as well as I think it will, I was considering some improvements to the house. Maybe build on another room, fix the porch properly, maybe get a better stove for the kitchen. Thought I'd ask what you think would be most useful." The fact that he was asking her opinion, including her in his plans for the future, meant more than he probably realized. "A better stove would make cooking easier," she admitted. "But Dalton, you should spend your money on what you need for the ranch." "The house is part of the ranch," he said. "And you're part of the household. Your opinion matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Dalton spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "When I made you that offer at the train station, I was thinking practically. I needed help, you needed work. Simple transaction. But I realize now it's become more than that. You've made this place feel alive again. Made me remember what it's like to come home to something good instead of just a place to sleep between work days." Helena's heart was beating too fast. "I'm glad I came here," she said, keeping her voice steady with effort. "I know it wasn't how either of us planned, but I'm glad." "Me too," Dalton said quietly. The moment stretched between them, weighted with things unsaid. Then Tom's voice called out from near the barn, asking about something for the morning, and the moment broke. Dalton rose to answer him, and Helena went inside to start cleaning up from supper, her mind whirling. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The cattle were rounded up and driven to market, which meant Dalton was gone for 5 days. With just Tom and Eddie around, and only for part of each day, the house seemed too quiet. Helena found herself listening for Dalton's voice, his footsteps, and acknowledged to herself that her feelings had grown beyond what was wise or probably appropriate. When he returned, riding in at dusk on the 5th day, she was embarrassingly glad to see him. He looked tired but satisfied, and over supper he reported that the sale had gone well, even better than projected. He had money to see them through the winter with plenty left over for improvements and investment in the spring. "I got you something," he said after they finished eating. From his saddlebag, he pulled out a package wrapped in brown paper and handed it to her. Helena unwrapped it carefully to find fabric, beautiful cotton fabric in a rich blue that matched her eyes, enough for a dress. Beneath it was a smaller package containing thread, buttons, and a new pair of scissors. "I noticed your dresses were getting worn," Dalton said, looking oddly uncertain. "Thought you might like something new. If the color's wrong or you don't like it, I can take it back next time I'm in town." "It's perfect," Helena said, running her hand over the smooth fabric. No one had given her a gift in years, certainly not something so thoughtful. Thank you, Dalton. Truly. He looked relieved. Good. I wasn't sure, but the woman at the mercantile said it would suit you. That night, Helena carefully folded the fabric and stored it with her things, but she lay in bed thinking about the gift. It meant something, didn't it? He had thought about her while he was in town. He had noticed what colors she wore. He had wanted to give her something nice. Those weren't the actions of a man who saw her only as his housekeeper. As October arrived and the weather began to cool, the ranch settled into a different rhythm. The urgent push of preparing for and executing the roundup was done. There was still plenty of work, always work on a ranch, but the pace was less frantic. Dalton spent more time around the house, doing maintenance projects and repairs. Helena made her dress, working on it in the evenings by lamplight, and tried not to notice how often she caught Dalton watching her as she sewed. One afternoon, when Tom and Eddie had left early because Eddie was feeling poorly, Dalton came to find Helena in the garden, where she was harvesting the last of the vegetables before the first frost hit. "Let me help," he said, kneeling beside her and beginning to pull carrots. They worked together in companionable silence for a while. Then Dalton said, "Helena, can I ask you something personal?" Her heart skipped. "Of course." "When you answered Sam Porter's advertisement, were you hoping for love, or just escape?" The question caught her off guard. She sat back on her heels and considered it honestly. "Escape, mostly. I hoped we might grow to care for each other over time, but I wasn't expecting romance. I was expecting safety and a new start." "Why do you ask?" He pulled another carrot and examined it unnecessarily. "I've been thinking about something. About us, I mean." He took a breath. "When I asked you to come here, I meant it about keeping things professional. I wasn't looking for anything more than help around the house. But things change. Feelings change, at least mine have." Helena's hands stilled on the vegetables. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as just my housekeeper. I look forward to our evenings talking on the porch. I find myself thinking about you when I'm out working, wondering if you'll like something I saw, or if I should tell you about something funny that happened. When I was in town for the sale, the first thing I thought about was bringing something back for you." He finally looked at her directly. "I'm saying I've developed feelings for you, and I wanted to be honest about that. But I also know this is complicated because you work for me and live in my house. I don't want you to feel pressured or obligated in any way." Helena's mind raced. He had feelings for her. Dalton Price, this good, honest, hard-working man who had rescued her from a desperate situation, had feelings for her. And the truth was, she had feelings for him too. But was it real? Was it just proximity and gratitude? How could she be sure? "I've developed feelings for you too," she admitted, the words coming out barely above a whisper. "But I don't know if I can trust them. What if I'm just grateful? What if you're just lonely? What if we're both confusing circumstances with something real?" Dalton nodded slowly. "Those are fair questions. Here's what I know. I'm not lonely anymore, and I still have these feelings. You've been here nearly 2 months now. The novelty has worn off. I know your habits, your moods, the way you hum when you're cooking and concentrate so hard when you're sewing that you bite your lip. I know you're practical but also kind, that you work hard but find joy in small things, that you're stronger than you look and braver than you think. And knowing all that, I want more. I want to see where this could go between us." "What exactly are you proposing?" Helena asked. "I'm proposing we acknowledge that this is more than an employment arrangement and see if it can become something else. We take our time, do this properly. I court you. We get to know each other with the understanding that we're both open to the possibility of more. And if it doesn't work out, if we discover that these feelings aren't what we thought, then we figure out what comes next honestly." He paused. "I know it's complicated." I know there's a power imbalance with me being your employer, but I give you my word that if you want to end this, either the courtship or the employment or both, you'll have money enough to get back east or to start fresh somewhere else. You're not trapped here. The offer was more than fair. It was generous and thoughtful and exactly what she should expect from a man like Dalton. Helena looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to imagine her life without him in it. The thought left her cold. "I would like that," she said. "I would like to see where this goes." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. "Yeah, yeah," she confirmed and found herself smiling back. He reached out and took her hand, his work-roughened fingers warm around hers. "I'm going to do this right. I'm going to court you properly." "We live in the same house," Helena pointed out. "How exactly does proper courting work in these circumstances?" "We'll figure it out," Dalton said. "But for starters, how about we plan a picnic for Sunday? There's a spot by the creek that's real pretty. We can take the afternoon, just the two of us." "That sounds lovely," Helena said. That Sunday, Dalton hitched up the wagon and they drove to the creek, about 2 miles from the house. Helena had packed a basket with fried chicken, biscuits, preserves, and the last of the fresh berries from the garden. The spot Dalton had mentioned was indeed beautiful, where the creek widened into a clear pool and trees provided shade and privacy. They spread a blanket and ate lunch, talking easily about everything and nothing. Without the structure of work surrounding them, the conversation flowed in new directions. Dalton told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build it into something substantial that could support a family. Helena talked about her childhood, about the books her father had loved, and how she still missed the smell of his bookshop, leather and paper and ink. After they finished eating, they walked along the creek. At one point, Helena stumbled on the uneven ground and Dalton caught her arm, steadying her. But instead of releasing her once she was stable, he kept his hand on her arm, gentle but present. "Is this all right?" he asked. "Yes," Helena said. "More than all right." She liked the feeling of his touch, casual and warm. They ended up sitting on a large flat rock near the water, close enough that their shoulders touched. Dalton pointed out a hawk circling overhead, talking about how the different birds of prey hunted. Helena found herself watching him more than the bird, noticing the way his face animated when he talked about things he cared about. "What?" he asked, catching her looking. "I'm just happy," she said simply. "It's been a long time since I felt this way." Dalton reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Me too." As the days grew shorter and colder, their courtship continued in small, sweet moments. Dalton would find excuses to come to the house during the day, always with some practical reason but lingering to talk with her. Helena took extra care with her appearance, wearing her new blue dress more often than practical. In the evenings, they sat closer together on the porch, and he taught her about the stars, pointing out constellations and telling her the stories his mother had taught him as a child. One evening in November, the first snow began to fall. They watched it from the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cold, as fat white flakes drifted down and transformed the landscape into something magical. "I've never seen snow like this," Helena said. "In Philadelphia, snow was always dirty almost as soon as it fell. This is beautiful." "It's peaceful," Dalton agreed. "I always loved the first snow of the season." He turned to look at her. "Helena, I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I don't want to pressure you to say it back if you're not ready, but I needed you to know. These past months with you here, they've been the happiest I've had in years. You've brought light back into my life. I want a future with you. Marriage, children if we're blessed with them, building this ranch into something we can both be proud of. I want all of it with you." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. I'm falling in love with you too. I think I have been for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it, even to myself. But Dalton, I'm ready to admit it now. I love you. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. Can I kiss you? Yes, she whispered. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Marry me, Dalton said. I know we've only been courting a few weeks, but I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. Yes, Helena said without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Helena felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was real. This was right. Whatever strange path had brought her to Enid, Oklahoma Territory, to that train station, to Dalton Price, she was grateful for it. They were married 3 weeks later, in a simple ceremony in town with Tom and Eddie as witnesses, and a few other ranchers they knew in attendance. Helena wore her blue dress, and Dalton wore his Sunday best, and when they promised to love and cherish each other for all their days, Helena knew she meant every word. The wedding night was tender and gentle, Dalton patient with her inexperience, both of them learning each other in new ways. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed that was now theirs to share, Helena thought about how strange life was. She had come west to marry a man she had never met, and instead had found love with a man she had never expected. "What are you thinking?" Dalton asked, his fingers trailing through her hair. "That I'm glad Sam Porter sent that telegram, even if it was delayed or sent by someone else or whatever actually happened, because it brought me here to you." "I'm glad too," Dalton said. "Though I feel bad for speaking ill of the dead, I can't help but think I got the better end of things. You were meant to be mine." As winter settled over the ranch, Helena and Dalton built their life together. The work continued, harder now with snow and cold to contend with, but Helena found she didn't mind. She learned to manage livestock, to doctor sick animals, to do all the things a rancher's wife needed to know. Dalton taught her to ride properly, and they took rides together when the weather allowed, exploring the land that was now her home too. Tom and Eddie treated her with the same respect they always had, though now it was clearly respect for their boss's wife rather than just the housekeeper. Other ranchers' wives began to visit, welcoming Helena into their community. She learned she wasn't the only woman who had come west seeking a fresh start. Many of them had stories similar to hers, of leaving behind difficult situations in the East and finding new lives in the territory. By February, Helena suspected she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Dalton, and when she finally did, over breakfast on a cold morning, he set down his coffee cup and just stared at her. "You're certain?" he asked. "As certain as I can be without a doctor." "All the signs are there." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she squeaked a protest. "Sorry," he said, loosening his grip but not letting go. "I'm just so happy, so damn happy." He paused. "Are you happy?" "I know this is fast, and I know it's not always easy." "I'm very happy," Helena assured him. "I want this baby, I want our family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. As Helena's belly grew, so did the ranch's prosperity. Dalton used the profits from the previous year's sale to improve the house, building on 2 additional rooms and installing the better stove he had promised. He hired an additional ranch hand to help Tom and Eddie, a young man named Sam who was learning the trade and grateful for steady work. In early August, exactly 1 year after Helena had arrived at the Enid train station, she went into labor. Dalton rode to town to fetch the doctor and bring back Mrs. Grant, Tom's wife who had moved back to the area and had experience with childbirth. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Dalton feared losing Helena the way he had lost Mary. But Helena was strong, stronger than anyone had given her credit for. And as dawn broke on August 12, 1894, she delivered a healthy baby boy. Dalton held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," he whispered. "He is," Helena agreed, exhausted but glowing. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never quite decided. Now, looking at his son, Dalton said, "What about Daniel? Daniel Joseph Price. Daniel was my father's name and Joseph was yours." "Daniel," Helena said, testing the name. "I like it. Daniel Joseph Price. Welcome to the world, little one." The first year of Daniel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and amazing moments. Helena discovered she loved being a mother, even when she was exhausted. Dalton was an attentive, devoted father, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with a fussy baby so Helena could sleep. The ranch continued to prosper, each year a little better than the last. When Daniel was 2, Helena became pregnant again. This time, she delivered a daughter they named Marie, after Dalton's mother. 2 years after that came another son, James. The house filled with the noise and chaos of children, and Helena sometimes thought back to that frightened woman standing alone on the train platform and marveled at the distance traveled. One evening in the summer of 1899, with Daniel nearly 5, Marie 2, and baby James just starting to crawl, Helena stood on the porch watching her family. Dalton was showing Daniel how to rope a fence post, patiently correcting his grip while Daniel concentrated fiercely. Marie was helping by getting in the way and chattering constantly. James was with Mrs. Grant, who often came to help with the children now that her own were grown. Tom came up beside Helena. "You've built something good here," he observed. "When I first met Dalton after Mary died, I wasn't sure he'd recover. He was lost. But you brought him back." "He saved me first," Helena said. "I was the one who was lost when I arrived." "Maybe you saved each other," Tom suggested. "Funny how things work out sometimes." Helena thought about that. If Sam Porter hadn't died, she would have married him and lived a completely different life. She might have been happy or she might not have been. She would never know. But she did know that this life, the one she was living right now, was exactly what she wanted. The love she shared with Dalton had grown deeper and richer over the years. They had built not just a household but a family, not just survived but thrived. Dalton looked up from his lesson with Daniel and caught her watching. He smiled, that particular smile he reserved just for her, and mouthed, "I love you." She mouthed it back, her heart full. That night, after the children were asleep, Helena and Dalton sat on the porch as they had so many nights before. The ranch stretched around them, peaceful in the moonlight. Dalton took her hand, a gesture so familiar now she barely noticed it, except that it still made her feel cherished and safe. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying with me instead of going back east or trying to find something else?" "Never," Helena said firmly. "Not even for a moment. This is where I was meant to be." "I think about that day at the train station sometimes," Dalton said. "How close we came to never meeting. If I had been later, if you had already left, if I hadn't been bold enough to make that offer." "But you were, and you did," Helena said. "And I was brave enough to accept. We found each other, Dalton. Against all odds, we found each other." "I've been waiting for you," he said, echoing the words he had spoken all those years ago. "I didn't know it at the time, but I had been, waiting for you to come and make my life complete." "And I had been waiting for you," Helena replied. "Waiting for someone who would see me for who I really am and love me anyway. Someone who would give me the space to be strong." They sat together as the stars came out, talking quietly about their plans for the ranch, about the children's futures, about all the years stretching ahead of them. It wasn't the life Helena had planned when she boarded that train in Philadelphia. It was infinitely better. As the years continued to pass, the Price Ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Daniel grew into a capable young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. Marie proved to be talented with horses, gentling even the most spirited animals with patience and skill. James showed an unexpected aptitude for numbers and helped keep the ranch's accounts organized. In 1904, Helena delivered twins, a boy and girl they named Samuel and Rose, and in 1906, their last child arrived, another daughter they called Grace. Through all of it, through good years and difficult ones, through illness and health, through the ordinary challenges of life, Helena and Dalton's love remained constant. They had learned early on how to communicate, how to support each other, how to be true partners in every sense of the word. The ranch they built together was more than just land and cattle. It was a legacy of love and hard work, a testament to what two people could create when they chose each other every single day. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Dalton took Helena back to the creek where they had their first official outing during their courtship. The children were old enough to be left with Tom and his wife for the afternoon, and it was just the two of them, like it had been at the beginning. 15 years, Dalton marveled, feels like yesterday and forever at the same time. I know what you mean, Helena said. She looked at him, at the gray threading through his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, at the familiar beloved face she knew better than her own. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. I didn't think that was possible, but it's true. I love you more too, Dalton said. You're everything I never knew I needed. You made me believe in happiness again when I thought that part of my life was over. We saved each other, Helena said, remembering Tom's words from years ago. I think that's what love is supposed to do. They renewed their vows right there by the creek, with only the birds and the wind as witnesses, promising once again to love and cherish each other for all their remaining days. When they kissed, Helena felt the same flutter in her stomach she had felt at their first kiss, proof that love didn't have to fade with time. It could grow and deepen and become something even more beautiful than its beginning. As they drove back to the ranch in the wagon, Helena thought about how many times life had surprised her. The telegram that was sent too late, the train station where she was left behind, the stranger who had said he had been waiting for her. Every piece had fallen into place exactly as it was meant to, even when it seemed like everything was going wrong. The house came into view, larger now than when she first saw it, painted and well-maintained and filled with life. Smoke rose from the chimney where Mrs. Grant was making supper. Children's voices carried on the evening air as they played in the yard. This was home, built by love and sustained by commitment and faith in each other. Dalton pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to her before they climbed down. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For getting on that train, for being brave enough to come west, for saying yes when I asked you to come home with me, for choosing me every day since then. Thank you for all of it." Helena took his face in her hands and kissed him softly. "Thank you for waiting for me at that station. Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving. Thank you for loving me exactly as I am. Thank you for this beautiful life." As they walked into the house together, greeted by the chaos and love of their large family, Helena silently thanked whatever force had arranged her life just so. She had been left behind at a train station, frightened and alone and uncertain. But she had also been found there by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. Sometimes, she thought, the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best ones. Sometimes being left behind means you are exactly where you are supposed to be. That night, after the children were all tucked into bed, and the house was finally quiet, Helena and Dalton stood on the porch one last time, looking out at their land under the stars. Dalton's arm was around her waist, her head rested on his shoulder, and everything was exactly right. "No regrets?" Dalton asked, a question he had asked many times over the years. "Not a single one," Helena replied, the answer she always gave because it was always true. They stood together in the peaceful night, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last all their days. The ranch would continue, passed down to their children and their children's children, but more than land and cattle. They would pass down the story of how love could bloom in the most unexpected places, how courage could lead to joy, and how sometimes being left behind at a station was really just the beginning of the journey home. The years that followed were filled with all the richness of a life well lived. Daniel married a schoolteacher from town and took over more of the ranch management as Dalton began to slow down, though he never truly retired. Marie married one of the neighboring rancher's sons, combining two properties into an even larger spread. James went to college back east to study business, but returned home to help modernize the ranch's operations, bringing new ideas while respecting the old ways. The twins and Grace grew up in a home filled with love and laughter, learning the values of hard work and family that their parents had built their lives around. Helena and Dalton grew old together, their love weathering the years like a well-built house weathering storms. They sat on their porch through countless sunsets, hands clasped, talking less but needing words less too. They had built something that would outlast them, not just in property and children, but in the example they set of what love could be when two people truly chose each other. When Dalton died at 73 after a short illness, Helena held his hand and thanked him one last time for waiting for her at that station. He smiled and told her he would wait for her again, on the other side, for as long as it took. Helena lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and when she finally closed her eyes for the last time, those who were with her said she went with a smile on her face, as if she was going to meet someone she loved. They were buried on the hill overlooking the ranch, side by side under a shared headstone that reads simply, "Dalton and Helena Price. They chose each other." And beneath that, the dates of their births and deaths, bracketing a love story that had started at a train station in Enid, Oklahoma Territory, in the summer of 1893, when a woman was left behind and a man said the words that would change both their lives forever. "I've been waiting for you." The ranch continued through the generations, always a Price place, always carrying the legacy of the love that had built it. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, people said you could see two figures standing on the old porch, hands clasped, looking out over land they had loved and worked and made their own. It was just a story, of course, the kind of romantic tale people liked to tell. But those who knew Helena and Dalton's story best thought that maybe, just maybe, love that strong didn't entirely leave, even when the people who created it had moved on. Maybe it soaked into the land itself, a blessing and a promise that love was always worth choosing, always worth fighting for, always worth the risk. And so the story ended where all good love stories should, with two hearts joined, a life well lived, and a legacy that would continue long after the final sunset. Helena had been left behind at a station, but in being left behind, she had found everything she never knew she needed. She had found home. She had found purpose. She had found love. She had found Dalton and he had found her, and together they had built something beautiful,